I'm the sixth generation to live and work on my family's farm in northeast Iowa. We have a corn, soybean, and wheat farm just south of a tiny 2,000-person town called Jesup. And over 150 years ago, my ancestors came from Germany looking for fertile farm ground and a new place to call home. And over those past 150 years and 6 generations, my farm has grown today into what is now known as the Blue Diamond Farming Company. So, now that you know a little bit about me, I want to get to know a little bit about you. I'm going to ask you a question, and that is, what do you think of when you think of the word agriculture? Oh, yeah, corn. Corn's a great one. We have lots of corn around my house. Probably why my mom didn't let me watch Signs as a child. What else? The big things you drive. Right. Boom, you guys are smart. Yeah. Floppy ears goes moo. You guys got it. And unfortunately, I am so sorry to tell you that cow tipping is not a hobby of mine back home. And what else? I think plaid is a pretty big stereotype of farmers. And then I said it was a stereotype, and then half of my family showed up today wearing plaid. And plus, if I mention it, then I get to throw Chris Pine up here, so win-win. What I realized, though, is that while all these things are relevant to agriculture, that they're at the basis of agriculture. It's the very foundation of agriculture, but a lot of this knowledge encompassed all the agricultural knowledge some people had here in Chicago. And so, I didn't realize what a privilege it had been to grow up on a farm and have all this information at my fingertips. I never had to second guess anything. I always knew where my food came from. And so, when I finally came to the bustling 3 million person metropolis of Chicago for my 2,000 person town, I faced some interesting questions from my peers. And I have a couple favorites. And for the first question that one of my friends asked me, does everybody know what a Zamboni is? Yeah? Great. Okay, yeah, it's that thing that smooths the ice at hockey rinks. Yeah. Okay, so one day, one of my friends came up, and it was about springtime, it was March, and she knew something was going down at the farm, it was about to go down. And she walks up and goes, "Hey, Lauren." And I go, "Yes, what's up?" And she goes, "Isn't it about time that your family is about to Zamboni the fields?" And I had a chuckle, and of course I knew that she meant planting. And so I told her all about planting, answered questions she had, and I think we both left that conversation a little bit more enlightened. And then my next favorite one is a question about milking, right? So another one of my friends came up to me and she goes, "Lauren," like, "Yes, what's up?" She goes, I had a question, okay? How many times a day would you say you have to milk the chickens? So I had two answers. The first one was being, if I had to milk the chickens, I would need a very short stool. And second, I knew after a couple questions, I knew that she meant collect the eggs. And while we don't have chickens on our farm anymore, I do know a little bit about it. So I told her a little bit about egg collection, hens, whatever she wanted to know that I knew. And while these were both really, really silly, I didn't realize how much I'd taken for granted when I worked on the farm and lived on the farm, how much I just knew that it wasn't actually common sense. And so, while these ideas that we mentioned before are at the basis of agriculture, they're pretty old-fashioned knowledge about agriculture. And so I think that begs the question, what is agriculture today? And I think a great way to think about that is in terms of population. So, as you can see here, this is a population graph. And in about the 1940s, when it was the last time that everything was considered to be organic, the world's population was 2 billion people. And now, in 2014, the world population has breached 7 billion people. So, farmers were faced with a conundrum. They have a static amount of land, but an increasing population to feed. So how do you conquer that? Well, they had to become more streamlined. They had to become more business-like. They had to become more science-minded. They had to start thinking about the future. And so farming has changed over that time. And since then, since they've become more forward-thinking, you would see a farmer wearing plaid and overalls just as much as you might see him or her wearing a business suit. So if you'll pardon me, let me change up to being a modern farmer. Give me a second. haha, I was wearing pants. All right. First of all, that's a lot cooler, so. And it feels a lot better. Now I'm ready to think about the future of agriculture. I got my power heels on, wear them in the combine, you know. So farmers had to become more streamlined and think about what they were going to do for the future of agriculture. And one of the first things that farmers came up with in the 1940s, back then when everything was still considered to be organic, was tillage. And so tillage is ripping up the soil, making it fluffier, so plants have an easier time growing to grow big and strong. And that was the best technology they had at the time. It worked great. But over time, they came to realize that, you know, there's some detriments to tillage. For instance, if you till too much, you may come to realize that the soil is fluffy enough to blow away in the wind, wash away in the water. You know, the best soil on the face of the earth, some of it resides in the Midwest of the United States, so we can't have that washing down the Mississippi. So the next thing we came up with was chemicals. And chemicals worked for a while. They killed fungi, pests, weeds in the field, leaving more room for plants to grow, making it easier for them. But of course, I'm sure you've heard that there are problems with chemicals too. For instance, if you use too many of them, they could wash into water streams, pollute water tables. We didn't want any of that. So the next thing we moved on to were GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. And these all came about because of a man named Dr. Norman Borlaug. So Dr. Norman Borlaug in the 1960s had been working for decades in his lab to come up with a strain of wheat to help feed the starving Indian population. He worked to make sure that it could survive Indian soil conditions, Indian weather conditions, and was safe for people to eat. And because of his invention, he is now personally accredited for saving the lives of over 1 billion people himself. And like I said, it didn't happen overnight. He worked for decades in the lab to make sure it was safe, edible, that it would be easily grown in their soil conditions. And so nowadays, we can do that even faster. We don't have to spend decades. Instead of waiting for plants to grow, picking out the best ones, crossing them, waiting for the best plants to grow, picking them, you know, wash, rinse, repeat. Instead, now, we can go in, read the DNA on a seed, only grow the ones we want, and cross them again. We can come up with a new variety that works even better in just a few years. This corn farmer, we're going to call him Farmer McDonald. He, in the year 1940, I think this is a good way to think about this, could raise enough food to feed 19 people every year. That's great. 19 times himself. He's really helping a lot of people out. But through all of these advances, in the year 2010, same Farmer McDonald can now feed 156 people all by himself. And this came out of two things. It came out of those technological advances I'm telling you about, and also because less than 1% of people in the nation are farmers. We gotta feed a lot more people with just one guy now. And I think a lot of people are afraid of the fact that we might be creating Frankencorn. Some people think that we're trying to create corn that can grow 2 times, 3 times, 10 times as much as the average ear of corn. And that's not true. We're just trying to keep the amount of kernels that corn could potentially grow on the ear. So I want you to think of it like this. I want you to think of it like a cup, right? And that cup is the ear of corn, and as many kernels as you can grow in the ear of corn is how much water you can keep in the cup. And for every detriment that comes along to your field, you have to poke another hole in the cup. So let's say that a windstorm comes by your field, knocks down a ton of corn. Poke a hole in the cup, you lose a little bit of yield, you lose a little bit of water. And then after that, a fungus rips through your farm, killing a whole bunch more corn. You lose a little bit more water. And then, after that, pests come to your field, poke another hole in the cup. And then, after that, your farm is swarmed with weeds, and you poke another hole in the cup until all you're left with is a semblance of the food you once had to feed 7 billion people. And now what technology has done over the years, those advances that I've been talking about, have been serving to patch up the holes in the cup. So like I said, first one was tillage. Patch a hole in the cup, put a little more water in the cup, you keep a little bit more yield on your ear of corn. And the next were chemicals. We put another patch in the cup and we could keep more corn in the field. And then after that, now we have GMOs, and we could keep even more corn in the field, even more yield, even more water in the cup. And so I'm not saying that these are the only 4 holes we have to deal with, right? We certainly have a lot more. But I don't know that the solution is really to go back to a method with which we can only feed 5 billion people instead of 7. I don't want to be added to the starvation list. I don't want my friends to be added to it. And so I think that people don't get a lot of exposure to the differences between GMO and organic from a farmer. So I want you to look at it like this at the base level. This is a picture of 2 piles of corn. And one of them is GMO, and one of them is organic. Now, can you tell which is which? Yeah, me neither, and I farm for my whole life. But it's not apparent as it becomes seed, but as it grows up, I'm gonna switch to beans here, so bear with me, but as it grows up, now it's apparent. Can you guess which one is organic and which one is GMO? Well, if you guessed the one on the left is organic, you would be right, and these 2 beans have been infested with something called a soybean looper, which is a worm, a little pest that loves to eat soybean plants. And I think a lot of people are afraid of what we did to get to this point, that some sort of weird genetic manipulation has gone on. And the point is that as a farmer, I'm not really looking forward for a soybean plant that's been crossed with Velociraptor DNA, like to get a really cool plant. No, I want a plant that has leaves that taste bad to bugs, but the beans taste the same to humans. I want a plant that uses less chemicals, so I don't have to put as many in my field and on this earth. And so, I want you to visualize that if we were to go back to all organic and raise as much food organically as we did now, this year, or last year, including GMO plants, we would have to chop down an extra 1.7 billion acres of vegetation to make up for the difference. And if that's hard to visualize, I want you to think of it like this. So about 1 acre is about the size of a football field. Got that in your mind? That tiny speck up there that I can't see and I'm up here presenting, that is 1 acre, and these 2 chunks down over here are 2 billion acres. And if that's still hard to visualize, you can think of it like this. The Amazon rainforest is about 2 billion acres, and as you can see, it makes up a good chunk of the United States. So if we were to raise as much organically as we do now, including GMO crops, we would have to cut down the entire Amazon rainforest. Now, just because you cut that down doesn't mean it's arable, doesn't mean it's good farmland. So I'm not saying that going back to all organic is really difficult or really, really hard. I'm saying it's impossible. We can't do it without having people starve. And I don't really want to turn away 7 billion, soon to become 9 billion people knocking at my door every night asking for supper. So the difference between agriculture now and the difference between agriculture then, I mean, it's the technology, but a lot of it's still the same. We're still all about cows, plows, sows. We're still about long days out in the field. We're still all about the plaid. We're still all about like tight-knit family connections. The only difference is that now we have 5 billion more people to feed than in the 1940s. Also, between now and the year 2050, we will have to raise more food than has ever been grown in the past 10,000 years combined. And we can't do it without technology. And I'm not saying that GMOs are the end-all technology to end all. I'm just saying it's the best we have right now, and I don't know what's in the future. Are we going to have solar-powered robots that individually pick off bugs off of plants? I mean, if you saw in Star Trek, we can think about it. But if there's anything that I want you to get out of this today, it's that I want you to trust a farmer. Because I have to eat this food. My family has to eat this food. My best friends have to eat this food, and I don't want to feed them anything that I don't trust. Also, if anybody has to be a good curator of the land, it's farmers. Because the land that I said that we've been farming for 6 generations was there for my great-great-great-great-great-grandpa. It was there for my grandpa. It's there for my dad. It's there for me now. I want it to be there for my kids and their kids and 50 generations down the road. I do not want to be the girl who killed the goose who laid the golden egg. I want to leave the smallest carbon footprint and be as green as I possibly can while producing food for 9 billion people. And so before you take the BuzzFeed quiz and believe it is fact, not to discount those, I've taken a few or a lot of those in my day. Or before you read that article without checking where the sources came from, what the study was like, I want you to stop and think and trust a farmer. Because, if anything, I am so honored at the opportunity to be able to grow you, and to grow you, and to grow your family and this auditorium and the planet, the food, fuel, and fiber that they need to live their lives every single day. And so, from a farmer, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for letting me grow your food. Y'all come back now.